Nope. We don't need to speed up the process. We don't need to nuke this. You know why? Because this is the non-microwave truth.
I am CL Whiteside, and this is brought to you by Time of Grace Ministry. I want to first start off by saying thank you. Thank you to all the people that support Time of Grace Ministry by supporting it financially or through prayer or through positive word of mouth. Rather, it's through sharing the resources with different people, sharing the comments and encouraging us, man. I appreciate you a lot, and understand you are helping advance the kingdom for sure, because we want to bless people. We want people to hear about Jesus and the gospel, and we want people to hear the non-microwave truths of the Bible. So thank you to you, and shout out to you. Now, our first world problem question today is something I was actually a couple months ago, and the question was this, and I'm going to pose the same question to you. Who is your Mount Rushmore of the Bible? But you can't put Jesus on there, because we know Jesus should be on everybody's Mount Rushmore. But who is your Mount Rushmore? Meaning, like, who are 4 people that you are really fond of their life and what they were about in the Bible? Now, I'm gonna give you my 4. You can still you can borrow or you can share the same as me as well. But I want to hear from you. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Drop it in the comments right now. If you're my friend, go ahead and text me. Who's on your Mount Rushmore? Now, my 4 are Queen Esther. I love Queen Esther because of the fact that she won like a beauty pageant. She risked her life to save her people. I'm going to just stop right there. Go read the book of Esther. But she would be on my Mount Rushmore. Another person that would be on my Mount Rushmore is David, King David. His life is recorded in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And what you see with King David is from shepherd boy, military guru to king. But then he has some slip ups and he has some misfortunes. And it's like, man, it's so much that I can learn from King David's life. And I'm very fond of just looking at that, because sometimes we think I would never do some of the things that King David did, good or bad. But it's like, we are capable of that. The third that would be on my Mount Rushmore would be brother Joseph. Joseph in the Old Testament. I thought about putting the New Testament Joseph, because it's like you're playing father to someone else, but it's the Son of God that you're playing father to. But I went with Joseph in the Old Testament because life of patience. Like, you really have to look at him and admire the fact that he was patient. We love to hear about him being second in command in the greatest nation of that time, but it's like, dude went through some stuff and he remained patient. He remained faithful to God. And the last person on my list, I almost cheated and I almost put both of them. And I was going to say Joshua and Caleb, but I only can rock with one. So I'm going to go with Joshua, who was second in command to Moses. And the reason I'm fond of Joshua's life is because following someone great like Moses had to be difficult. But he showed us how to do it. How do you do it? You prioritize God's plan over your own plans, over your own pleasures, over your own wants, over your own desires. And there's so much to learn from Joshua. Joshua was a bold brother, even when the world was saying, no, let's not do this, or let's do it a different way. Joshua remained bold. Caleb did too, but he didn't make my Mount Rushmore. Now, this might change if you ask me in a month or two, because I might be studying the word. I'm like, say, ooh, this person should be on my Mount Rushmore. But I want to hear from you. Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. Who's your Mount Rushmore? If you got my phone number, text it to me. I want to know. I want to know who is your Mount Rushmore. You can even tell me why. And this is our first world problem. It is dinner time. The title of our episode is Beyond Comics and TV. This is real and better. Now, I made a summer mission that I was going to read the book of Judges. That's a book in the Bible. And I was reading this book one night and I literally couldn't put it down. I think I said I'll read like a chapter or two, but I kind of got to the end. I got to like chapter 19. And I was like, man, I got to keep going. I got to chapter 20. I need to keep going. I got to chapter 21. I got to finish this. And it was so good. It was better than any TV show. It was better than any comic book. It was better than any movie. And it was all real. Like, it's based off of historical events that literally happened. Like, notice I didn't say myths. This stuff literally happened, and it was just good. Like, it was really good. It was better than a TV show, better than the comic book, better than all of that. And when I got to Judges chapter 19, what made it so real is, one, that it's real, but it was just like, man, it starts off like any good TV show or any good movie. It started off with some type of corruption or some type of evil. It was this sickening rape, sickening murder. And then what happens? You try to figure out who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist. And it was confusing. You might read it and be like, I don't know, but it kept my attention the entire time. And you see people band together, and they pretty much had a civil war. They made some bad vows. And I remember reading this like, dude, I don't really remember reading this. But what really stuck out to me, what really got me, is when we try to create moral codes and we try to act off of our feelings or our emotions or our own wisdom without God, you're going to have some problems. You are absolutely going to have some problems. And I was like, man, this is definitely better than any TV show, better than any movie that I've been watching. And that's the beauty of the Bible. Now, the book of Judges, by the way, Max, I think you would love the book of Judges. So check it out. Judges is like a collection of historical events. So you get that. Now, when you read the Bible, pretty much everything is pointing towards Jesus. So the question that I want you to ask yourself throughout this podcast episode is, was Jesus like a judge? Was Jesus like a judge? And just to give you a little background, judges were those who were really, really good military leaders. Sometimes they were almost like judges that we have in the court system today. Like judges were almost like superheroes at times. Now, was Jesus expected to be like a judge? Now, if you remember in the time of Jesus, the Jews thought that he possibly could be like a king. John chapter 6, verse 14 tells us, after the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who has come into the world. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So they wanted him to be this judge and come and bust some Roman heads and make them a great nation. But that's not why Jesus came. Now, like I said, how was Jesus like the judges? I want you to just think about that as we go through this episode. Now, that book of Judges has a theme. It has a reoccurring theme, just like any TV show, just like any comic. There's some evil and there's some good. But this is very specific. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. That was one of the reoccurring themes. That's one of the reoccurring things that it says. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Then God sent a judge. So look at Judges chapter 2. We'll start at verse 16. It says, then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders. Jump into verse 18. Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for them, he was with the judge, and God is the one who saved them out of the hands of their enemies as long as the judge lived. For the Lord relented because of their groaning under those who oppressed and afflicted them. But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worshiping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways. Now, there are usually three judges that we highlight, that we talk about. One being Deborah. She was a woman, prophetess. She was one of those they would bring their disputes to. She would solve their problems. She would solve their issues. We love to talk about Deborah. One, she's a woman. Two, she was awesome. That's in Judges chapter 4 and 5. Another judge that we usually talk about is Brother Gideon. He was one of them from the smallest clan. He asked God to perform some miracles like, hey, can you make this wool dry and then everything around it wet, and vice versa? Make everything wet and then make the dry wool in the middle. Or did I say it wrong? But you get what I'm saying. He asked God to perform some miracles, and he was great in military success. Another one that we love to talk about is Samson. You remember, long hair, don't care. The dude who couldn't drink wine, wasn't supposed to have his hair cut ever. The one who had super strength, the one who would say riddles, the one who once tied up a bunch of foxes and lit some farmland on fire. Like that dude, the dude who killed 1,000 men with a donkey's jawbone. That's something. The one who he stayed picking bad booze. He stayed picking bad women. But we're not going to talk about any of those three in depth today. I wanted to look at some other judges that we have. And if you look at Judges chapter 3, it starts introducing us to some of these judges like Othniel. We're not going to talk about him either. But the one that I did want to talk about is Brother Ehud. Ehud was a left-handed hitman. I'm going to call him a hitman. And you're going to say, why do you call him a hitman? Well, listen to this. This is in Judges chapter 3, starting at verse 12. Listen to how it starts off. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. That's how it usually starts. And because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon, king of Moab, power over Israel. Jump into verse 15. Again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite. The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long, which he strapped to his right thigh under his clothing. So make sure you remember that. He presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab, who was a very fat man. I didn't say that, the word said that. After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal, he himself went back to Eglon and said, "Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you." The king said to his attendants, "Leave us," and they all left. Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, "I have a message from God for you." As the king rose from his seat, Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. I mean, he boo-booed on himself. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. So that's how fat he was. He stuck him with the sword. His sword stuck in there. The fat rose over it. It looked like you can't even see it. Back to verse 23. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came out and found the doors of the upper room locked. They said, "He must be relieving himself in the inner room of the palace." So he must have been known for taking some long bathroom breaks, if you know what I mean. They waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their lord fall into the floor dead. While they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped to Seirah. When he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him leading them. "Follow me," he ordered, "for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands." Now, I picture a scene from like Black Panther where he's like, "Wakanda forever." That's what I picture. It doesn't say that, but that's what I picture. So they followed him down and took possession of the fords. Fords are like shallow crossings of the Jordan that led to Moab. They allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not one escaped. That day, Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. So you see that God is evil, sends a judge. Judge does what God wants him to. He uses the judge. Now they have peace for 80 years. And then what do the Israelites do? They return to evil. Now, another judge that I want to talk about on this episode of Beyond Comics and TV, This Is Real and Better, is Shamgar. Now, Shamgar, look at what it says in verse 31. It says, "After Ehud had came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel." So, of course, I had to look up and remind myself, what's an ox goad? That's a spear with a hook on it. Now, 600 people you killing at one time? Like, I'm wondering, did he go to like tornado mode? Was he moving super fast? You see certain movies like, a person dies. Like, was this like in one mission? I just wonder. These are questions that I have. Like, how many hours did it take hours for him to kill these people, or did it take a few minutes for him to do this? I picture him being like Denzel Washington in The Equalizer. You ever seen Equalizer? Denzel was a bad man, and I picture Shamgar being like a bad man. Now, this is the type of stuff that all these movies and all these comic books are based off. They're based off of Judges. But what's the difference with Judges? Judges is actually true. It actually happened. Now, on this episode of Beyond Comics and TV, This Is Real and Better, I want to go out of the book of Judges, but just go read the book of Judges. It's a great read. Like I said, it's better than comics, it's better than TV, it's better than movies. I want to look at 1 Chronicles chapter 11. This is more so talking about like that superhero theme that we're kind of going with, but it's real. And this is titled David's Mighty Warriors. And it talks about David appointing 3 who were like the special 3. And then he had like 30 men. And I'll picture like the Avengers or X-Men or Justice League. And I just want you to think about and just listen to how this is describing one of the warriors. You should go read the rest. That's Chronicles chapter 11. It says, "There was also Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant warrior from Kabzeel. He did many heroic deeds, which included killing 2 champions of Moab. Another time on a snowy day, he chased a lion down into a pit and killed it." So dude is a thug. Dude is just a killer. He killed 2 champions. Lion, he handled that. Look at what it says in verse 23. Once, armed with only a club, he killed an Egyptian warrior who was a giant. He was 7.5 feet tall and who was armed with a spear as thick as a weaver's beam. Benaniah wrenched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with it. Deeds like these made Benaniah as famous as the 3 mightiest warriors. And you talk like, who's the 3 mightiest warriors? My guess is that it's Jashobeam, who was the leader of the 3. He was the mightiest warrior among David's men. Okay, he once used a spear to kill like 300 enemy warriors in a single battle. 300 enemies, single battle. Like, these boys is bad. These some bad jokers right here. Another one of them is Eleazar. He and David took their stand in the middle of a barley field and defended it. They killed the Philistines and the Lord gave them a great victory. I picture David and Eleazar being like back to back and they just handling their business, just, yeah, on some superhero stuff. Because God blessed them with it. God gave them the strength. Now back to verse 25. Benaniah was more honored than the other members of the 30, though he was not one of the 3. And David made him captain of his bodyguard. So we've talked about some names you might have never heard of. Benaniah being one. Eleazar being another. Jashobeam being another. Shamgar. Ehud. Like, have you heard of any of these people? The book of Judges, the book of Chronicles, those are one of those books sometimes that get overlooked, or sometimes we just focus on certain people. Just go read it. It's a fascinating read that the Lord can bless you with. And you see with this theme is that they did evil and then God had to send a judge. And what we notice is God is always there. And our moral code can't be trusted if we don't have God, if we don't have God. But you also see how God uses common man, the average man, to do some amazing things. He makes these men like superheroes. This is where we get all these comic books and these ideas on how things should be in movies. It's like people really did this stuff. We're fascinated with this, but this stuff actually happened. And I know some of you, if you actually got to reading in the good book, you'd be like, this is amazing. It would just make you more astonished on how God is amazing and how powerful our God is. And I want to wrap this episode up of Beyond Comics and TV. This is real and better by looking at Jesus. How is Jesus like the judge or like a judge? The judges that we've talked about, the warriors that we've talked about, the military leaders that we talked about. Jesus is God, but he humbled himself to live a common man's life. He gave up his throne in order to be sent down to this earth to save the whole world because he knew we couldn't save ourselves. Jesus honored the Father's plan. Jesus is the greatest judge. He is absolutely the greatest judge. He's the greatest warrior. He's the most powerful. He's the most impressive. That's Jesus. Jesus defeated the greatest and the biggest giant, being the devil. He defeated the enemy that haunts all of us, which is sin. He conquered our scariest enemy, which is death. As much as you love superheroes, as much as you love great TV shows or great movies, or you love a great book, reading the Bible and learning about Jesus is way better. It's way better. And you could have one of those nights like I had the other day where I'm just literally in God's word. Like, man, I can't put this down. This is good. Like, oh, what happened? Okay, I don't remember this. Or, man, the Lord is speaking to me in a different way. Like, this is what you can do. This is what the good book can do to you. This is how God speaks to us. This is how God speaks to us. And when we think about Jesus, Jesus is the best. Jesus is better than all these other dudes that we've talked about. He's the best. Jesus is powerful. Jesus is almighty. He is strong. And in every facet you could think of, you can see that he's better. And then when you look at this, you also will see when you get in the good book how much our God loves us, how much Jesus loves you, how much Jesus cares for you. And you see that because he suffered a life, he suffered a death as a villain. And even though he deserved to be treated as a king, he suffered for us because he loves us. He has that much compassion for us and he cares for us. And Jesus is the greatest judge. Jesus is the greatest military leader. Jesus is the greatest, period. And this is the non-microwave truth. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Beyond Comics and TV. This is real and better. Peace, punch, Captain Crunch. Say no to drugs and yes to Jesus. I am out.